The Malinor dynasty was certain they had tricked Earth. They never read the last line. Inside the Golden Treaty Chamber, Ambassador Christopher Vance finished reading the document for the third time.
Every trap, every buried clause. They think we're desperate.
You've had long enough, Ambassador. The terms are generous for a species so new to the galactic stage.
We've reviewed every line, Empress. We have one small addition, a standard reciprocity clause for clarity.
A minor annotation. The Dynasty has no objection to formal fairness.
His stylus moved across the hologram, finalizing the treaty.
You've made a wise decision, Ambassador. Humanity will benefit from our guidance.
They didn't read it. They never read the last line.
The treaty was signed. The Malinor celebrated their legal conquest, and deep in the document, a single clause waited. Within weeks, the treaty's restrictions began to bite. Fleet reductions started first.
They're requiring us to dismantle 30% of the home fleet. This isn't a peace treaty, it's a disarmament.
The order was carried out without protest. In Earth's orbital dockyards, warships were methodically broken down.
Your vessel lacks the new trade endorsement. All cargo destined for Dynasty systems is now subject to inspection and seizure.
Ambassador, the economic restrictions are strangling our supply lines. Factories are going idle.
I know. Issue standing orders, full compliance. No delays, no appeals. We honor the treaty to the letter.
Month by month, humanity absorbed the tightening grip. There were no public protests, no diplomatic notes of complaint.
The humans have accepted every term. No resistance, no legal challenges. They are thoroughly subdued.
Patience. The trap needs time to set.
2 years passed. The Malinor dynasty, satisfied with their prize, turned their attention to other conquests. On a distant Malinor colony, a governor received a legal petition citing an unknown clause from the treaty with humanity. The petition reached the imperial capital within hours. Across the empire, subject world legal advisors began citing the same obscure text.
A clause from the human treaty. I drafted every line. There were no hidden provisions. Reciprocity. Any restriction imposed on humanity automatically applies to the Dynasty's own subject worlds. They didn't just add a line, they added a mirror that reflects our own chains.
Jurist Viran entered the Empress's chambers, the treaty hologram casting his shadow long.
This is impossible. We wrote that treaty. How did this get past our jurists?
Reciprocity. Buried in the final drafts, I dismissed it as boilerplate. Every restriction we've used against humanity now binds our grip on every subject world.
And in the Imperial Tower, a single sentence began to unravel an empire. Within days, more subject worlds filed petitions. The clause outpaced the Empire's censors.
The treaty with humanity now guarantees our right to equal treatment. We will not be taxed where humans are not.
Issue a decree. All petitions citing this clause are null. The treaty does not apply to internal governance.
Your Majesty, the treaty text is explicit. Any restriction means any. The court systems will uphold it.
The Malinor dynasty demands immediate clarification on the reciprocity clause. Ambassador Vance is summoned to explain.
Ambassador, the Dynasty is demanding you explain the clause before their full council.
Acknowledge receipt. They'll have their answer when the treaty provides it.
Across the empire, colonial governors saw their orders overturned by local courts invoking the human treaty.
Find a loophole, Varan. There must be one.
The Malinor dynasty, masters of legal manipulation, had finally been outplayed, and they still didn't know by whom. Ambassador Vance returned to the Golden Treaty Chamber. The Empress stood rigid, Jurist Varan pale at her side.
You call this reciprocity? It is a dagger hidden in the final paragraph.
It's a mirror. Every fence you built around us now surrounds your own colonies.
You will remove it immediately. We will not negotiate under duress.
The treaty is sealed. You refused amendment clauses, remember? It stands as written.
We can challenge it in the galactic courts. A clause inserted without proper review is contestable.
Challenge a clause you signed before 100 witnesses. Good luck.
You planned this. The compliance, the patience, it was all theater.
We read your playbook. Then we played to win.
The Empire's own treaty, once a weapon, now tightened around its throat. Within days, Malinor patrols found themselves stranded outside their own colonies, trapped by the same restrictions they imposed on humanity.
The treaty grants us equal rights. We will no longer pay imperial tribute where humans do not.
Across the Empire, subject worlds invoked the clause in unison. Military governors found their orders nullified by local courts.
Every restriction we designed to strangle humanity is now strangling us.
Recall the fleets. Violating the treaty will invite the other powers to attack.
Economic sanctions backfired. Trade routes closed to human ships now closed to Dynasty merchants as well.
For 2 centuries, we have been second-class citizens. Today, the treaty with Earth makes us equals.
In the Imperial Treasury, gold reserves hemorrhaged. The Dynasty's financial pillar cracked under its own weight.
We built a cage for humanity and locked ourselves inside.
The Malinor dynasty, architect of 1,000 conquests, faced rebellion from within, ignited by a single overlooked line. In the imperial throne room, Empress Selena issued a final decree. The treaty was void. Her jurists refused to countersign.
You ungrateful cowards. The treaty is a human trick. I will not let it destroy us.
The Galactic Council's response arrived within hours. Unilateral abrogation triggers collective sanctions and potential intervention.
They are turning against me. Even the old alliances are crumbling.
Across a secure channel, Ambassador Vance's calm voice cut through the static.
The treaty you forced on us is irreversible. Break it, and the retaliation clauses activate against you.
You would start a war over a tiny clause?
No, Empress. You would, and you'd lose.
In the War Council, senior commanders openly questioned Selena's judgment. The Malinor dynasty stood alone, hemmed in by its own laws, with its own subordinates losing faith.
Ambassador Vance, we are taking back our worlds legally, but we need logistical support to enforce our rights.
Humanity will provide legal advisors and non-military aid. The treaty prohibits us from supplying arms.
Covertly, old human freighters began delivering supplies to subject worlds, their manifests carefully labeled as commercial.
Ambassador, 3 Malinor garrison commanders have contacted us. They wish to defect before their own troops mutiny.
Accept their surrender, but no military alliance. We are not conquerors.
In the Lyrisan capital, Ambassador Krell addressed a growing crowd, the treaty clause displayed prominently.
Our freedom is written in a treaty an empire forgot to read. Stand with us, humanity.
Malinor warships began flying flags of independence, their crews donning the colors of their homeworlds.
The dynasty is disintegrating. We must ensure no new tyranny fills the void.
Humanity's quiet support turned a legal victory into a silent revolution. The Empire's grip slipped further each day. In a final, desperate gambit, Empress Selena requested a private holocall with Ambassador Vance.
Ambassador, I am prepared to offer concessions. Alter the reciprocity clause, and I will grant humanity favored status.
The clause stays. It's the only fair part of the treaty.
You have destroyed my dynasty. I could order a strike on Earth right now.
Your military is fractured. You have no authority to give, except that.
Behind her, the last members of her council quietly withdrew, leaving her alone in the throne room.
They have all abandoned me.
You wanted a cage. We just chose the size.
The holocall ended. The Malinor Empress sat alone on her golden throne, the silence louder than any war. The Empire had no more moves. Only the final document awaited. The abdication document arrived in the empty throne room. Empress Selena's hand trembled as she signed. The Malinor Emperor's flag was lowered on the court station. Across the Empire, subject world leaders watched via holographic feeds.
The dynasty is dead. Today we are free.
Within hours, independence declarations erupted from a dozen worlds, cascading across the galaxy. In a neutral diplomatic hall, Ambassador Vance and his staff observed in silence. Humanity offered no public statement. The treaty that was meant to enslave humanity now guaranteed the rights of billions. The Malinor court station, once the heart of an empire, dimmed its lights for the last time.
We owe our freedom to those who read every line. Humanity, we stand with you.
The galaxy took note. A new power had risen, not through conquest, but through law, and deep in the treaty, the last line still blazed white, a quiet signature that outlasted a dynasty. 3 days after the abdication, Ambassador Christopher Vance broadcast a short statement from the human ship, unyielding word.
The Malinor dynasty built a cage, certain we wouldn't notice the bars.
Behind him, the treaty hologram shimmered, its final clause glowing with quiet emphasis.
We read every line. Then we added one of our own. We read all of it. That was the trick.
The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, silence held for a long, processing moment. In the Lyrisan capital, Ambassador Krell stood and began to applaud, tears in his eyes. The Galactic Assembly followed. Delegates rising one by one in slow, then thunderous acclaim. A species dismissed as naive had disarmed an empire with a single sentence. Humanity's reputation as the galaxy's finest legal minds was sealed forever. In the Lyrisan capital, a holographic statue of Ambassador Vance was proposed, a towering tribute planned for the main square.
Ambassador, your people's diligence gave us freedom. We wish to honor you with a statue.
Number. That's not who we are. It was just homework, reading the fine print. Anyone can do it.
You changed history with a single sentence. That is more than homework.
Then let the treaty be the monument. No statues, no pedestals.
The statue was never built. The Lyrissans instead inscribed the reciprocity clause into their own founding laws.
A clause against tyranny, preserved in our Constitution. A fitting tribute.
Empires fall when they forget to read. We must never make that mistake.
Across the human delegation, a quiet mantra took hold. Every line, every time. The Malinor Remnant Council met in the Golden Treaty Chamber, the throne behind them empty and cold.
The reciprocity clause is irrevocable. We must accept its terms or cease to exist.
In a silent, self-imposed exile, Empress Selina watched the broadcast of the new terms.
They built a legal cage so perfect it trapped us all.
The new interstellar charter was drafted in the same room, the reciprocity clause now its first article.
Humanity's single sentence will govern all future treaties. A fitting irony.
Across the galaxy, the once subject worlds inscribed the reciprocity clause into their new constitutions. The Malinor dynasty's name faded from official records, replaced by a footnote. Dissolved through its own legal trap, the quiet signature in the treaty became the cornerstone of a new interstellar legal era. And in the ashes of empire, the lesson echoed. Always read the last line. A year later, at the Human Diplomatic Academy, Ambassador Vance stood before a new class of trainees.
You've all studied the Malinor Treaty. What was its fatal flaw?
Behind him, a holographic copy of the original treaty appeared, the reciprocity clause blinking.
They didn't read the last line. We did. That single clause erased an empire. From now on, every treaty you draft, every agreement you sign, read every line, twice.
The trainees, some barely into adulthood, stared at the clause with new respect.
They understand. The lesson will outlast me.
In the back of the room, a holographic inscription read, "Every line, every time." The Human Diplomatic Corps adopted the mantra as its core doctrine, and the quiet signature in the treaty became a teacher's tool, passed from class to class. Years later, the unyielding word still orbited a free Lyrisan, its cities glowing in quiet celebration. A decade of independence. Secured by a treaty, the Empire never truly read. On Earth, the original treaty rested in a stasis field, its glow undimmed. The reciprocity clause pulsed softly, a silent monument to a dynasty undone by a single line. A child pressed her hand to the glass and asked why a single line mattered so much. A guide answered, because someone read every word. And the galaxy changed. The clause became the first article of 100 new constitutions, a shield for the weak. Ambassador Vance's name did not appear in the hall. By his own request, only the clause and the lesson it taught, a quiet signature that outlasted a dynasty, and in every diplomatic academy, a holographic inscription read, "Every line, every time." In the decades that followed, the treaty was studied in every classroom from Earth to the farthest colony. Ambassador Vance, now graying, would occasionally return to the academy to see the new crop of diplomats.
I never gave speeches anymore. I just sit in the back, watching the claws pulse.
A young trainee once asked if he ever regretted the quiet trap he'd laid.
Number. I regret that we had to do it at all.
He requested that no monument bear his name, and the clause became his only epitaph. Across the galaxy, new treaties always began with a single line. Any restriction imposed upon one shall apply to all, and the Malinor dynasty, once a terror, became a cautionary tale whispered to law students, always read the last line, quiet signature, that outlasted a dynasty, a human legacy written not in blood, but in fine print. And in the museum, the clause continued to glow, a silent sentinel against tyranny. Decades later, the unyielding word became a diplomatic museum, orbiting not one world, but many, carrying the treaty hologram to every system. Ambassador Vance, now an old man, stood before the original treaty hologram, one last time, the claws still glowing as it had decades ago.
We didn't win with weapons. We won with a sentence.
He placed his hand on the cold glass, then turned away, leaving the silent sentinel to its eternal vigil. In the years that followed, his name was added only to a small footnote in the Academy's entrance. Christopher Vance, who read the last line. The clause itself, preserved in perfect stasis, became a pilgrimage site for those who believed that law could be mightier than fleets. And whenever a new treaty was signed anywhere in the galaxy, the first clause was always the same. No restriction shall be imposed on one that is not borne by all. The Malinor dynasty became a legend told to children, the empire that forgot to read, and humanity became the species that remembered. Sometimes, victory is a quiet signature. Sometimes, it's the last line. And in the silence of the museum, the clause continued to glow, a quiet signature that outlasted a dynasty. In the centuries that followed, the reciprocity clause became the bedrock of interstellar law, its light woven into every founding document. The Galactic Assembly Chamber, built on the ruins of the Malinor Court Station, inscribed the clause in stone above its entrance. Children of 100 species learned the story of the forgotten line before they learned their own histories. Every time a new world joined the galactic community, the first question was not about weapons or trade, but about the last line of their charter. The stasis chamber on Earth remained open, the clause pulsing eternally, a silent reminder that words, truly read, could break empires. Ambassador Christopher Vance was remembered not with statues, but with the simple epithet. He read the last line, and slowly, across the galaxy, empires learned a new fear. Not legions, but lawyers, not fleets, but fine print. The quiet signature that outlasted a dynasty became more than a clause, it became a creed. And on the ancient golden ring where the treaty was signed, a single sentence was engraved. They never read the last line, and in every future, in every law, in every treaty, the last line blazed on. In the Galactic Assembly, a new tradition was born. Every session began with the reading of the Reciprocity Clause. Young diplomats from 1,000 worlds took an oath. I will read every line, for the last line holds the difference between freedom and chains. The treaty hologram, preserved in perfect stasis, was studied not as a relic, but as a blueprint for justice. And whenever tyranny threatened, the clause became a shield, invoked by the smallest worlds against the mightiest armadas. In the archive of Earth, the original stylus that signed the treaty lay next to the clause, a quiet testament to a quiet victor. The Malinor Court Station, now a solemn ruin, bore only the etched words. They never read the last line. Ambassador Christopher Vance was never called a hero. He was called the man who did his homework. And the galaxy never forgot. Centuries passed, and the clause continued to burn bright, a silent sentinel at the heart of every diplomatic chamber. And in the end, the greatest weapon humanity ever forged was a sentence, and the discipline to read it twice, a quiet signature that outlasted a dynasty. The clause became a living monument, a promise that no empire would write what it did not read. Historians called it the Vance Protocol, the first rule of diplomacy taught at every academy. The original treaty hologram, untouched by time, was the galaxy's most visited site not for beauty, but warning. On its pedestal, a simple inscription burned. They didn't read the last line. We did. Ambassador Vance's grave, unmarked by his request, was found only by those who followed the clause. They left not flowers, but handwritten copies of the clause, thousands forming a paper garden whenever a new power sought domination. The clause was whispered in assembly halls. Illegal weapon fleets couldn't defeat. The Malinor dynasty, forgotten but for this line, became the ultimate cautionary tale of hubris. In the museum, a child asked, "What does the last line say?" The guide smiled. No one is above the law, and that quiet signature, that last line, still blazes on, a testament to reading every word. In the deepest night, the museum stood silent, its only light the soft glow of the reciprocity clause. No guards were needed, for the clause itself was the best guardian, a truth that outshone any threat. Across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds, the last line of their charters still read the same: no restriction shall be imposed on one that is not borne by all. The Malinor Empire was long gone, but the lesson it paid for would never be forgotten. And in the quiet of the museum, the original clause pulsed on, a silent sentinel, a teacher's tool, a quiet signature that outlasted a dynasty. The galaxy had learned, the mightiest weapon is the one you make your enemy sign, and the one you bother to read. No statues were needed. The last line was memorial enough, and for as long as there were treaties, there would be those who remembered to read every word. A quiet signature, forgotten line, an empire undone, a galaxy changed. The last line still blazes. In the deepest chamber of the Earth Museum, the original treaty hologram floated alone, its clause a steady pulse in the dark. No guards stood watch, because the clause itself was the eternal guardian, a truth that outshone any threat. Across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds, the first article of every charter still read, unchanged: no restriction imposed on one that is not borne by all. The Malinor Empire was dust, but the lesson it paid for was carved into the legal soul of every civilization that followed. Humanity never built statues of its great lawyer. The last line was monument enough for those who understood, and sometimes, in the quiet hours, the descendants of those who had been freed would visit the museum just to see the line that broke their chains. They never read the last line. We did. That was the trick. The clause blazed once more, and the museum faded to silence, leaving only the afterimage of a quiet signature that outlasted a dynasty.